Hi everyone, welcome back to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. We're the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation, representing tens of thousands of individuals and groups who support this thing, one man, one woman marriage. I think it's really, really important. Yes, other things take place in society. Yes, sometimes marriages don't work out, but actually on a population basis, it really is the best way of bringing about the best version of the next generation. Now, just for saying those things, some people get punished. And we're talking to somebody this morning who has indeed been punished, but isn't putting up with it. It's a real privilege to have with us the Revd Richard Fothergill. Richard, it's a real privilege to talk to you. Would you like to say hello, first of all, to our listeners?
Hi, good morning. Very nice to be with you this morning.
Pleasure. Now, Richard, you've something very interesting has happened to you over the last couple of weeks. Do you want to tell us what's been going on?
Yes, bit of a surprise, really. I'm a member of the Yorkshire Building Society. I've had a savings account with them for 17 years. And they've been perfectly good as a bank. They've actually done a very good service on managing the money. And at one stage when we sold our house, we had quite a bit of money in that account. It's quite empty, fairly empty now, but there we are. And I've had this account. Anyway, every month, their marketing department puts out an email, which I'm afraid to me usually goes into junk mail. But they send these things out all the time, trying to develop customer relations. And the theme nearly always is the same, which is we want to hear from you, our members, our 3 million members. Tell us your views. What do you think? And the question they often pose is, how are we doing? How are we doing as a bank? Well, I've never replied to that before. But then in May, end of May, they sent one out to me. And they were brewing up for LGBTQA plus, wherever we are on letters now with that. Month of June, a whole month of June, where they're going to be pushing this. And so I thought, perhaps I should give them some feedback. And not really expecting them to take much notice of me, if honest, because I know how these things work, and that's probably just them feeling they need to keep asking their membership what's going on. So I wrote a very short thing, just 2 paragraphs on their portal, and sent it off. And there was 2 questions in there. One was, firstly, do you really think this is a constructive use of your time as a bank to be pushing this particular social agenda? Because you're obviously putting a lot of effort into this. That means someone's being paid and it's costing you time and money wise. Is this good for your brand? That was the question I put. And the second part was, I said that, and I signed my letter, the Reverend, so they knew where I was coming from as far as ethics are concerned. I said my second problem is I have a real problem with the T element of LGBT in particular, of transsexualism. And particularly where transsexuals are trying to get access to our children, which they are doing. They're trying to do.
Yep.
And you may have heard of the Tavistock Clinic getting closed down last year, because of all the invasive gender surgeries they've been doing on adolescents and things. And I've got a friend who's actually sort of working in that whole area, trying to highlight the damage done by getting hold of children and basically sort of indoctrinating them to tell them that they're in the wrong sex, that somehow they're in the wrong body. And so let's have an operation, let's pump you full of drugs. So that, I didn't go into any great detail about that with the YBS, but I said that I have a real problem with that element of it. And I think I may have said something along the lines of, you don't need to bow down to Stonewall's pushing of this agenda. Obviously Stonewall, that's what they're into. And I said, I didn't really expect any reaction at all. I thought best, they're probably going to ignore it. Best, if 100 other people like me wrote something similar, then the marketing department might say, hey, look, perhaps we ought to ease off on this Gay Pride Month. Some of our members, they're not so keen. And yeah, so much to my surprise, 2 weeks later, I got a letter, I've still got it, a printed letter signed by somebody from their sort of customer relations department saying, your views will not stand. The relationship between us has irrevocably broken down. Really? This was news to me. I thought we had got a good relationship going on. And they didn't justify why they're going to do it, but they say we're going to close your account down. You've got 2 weeks to do it, to clear the money out, And if you don't clear it out in 2 weeks, we'll send you what's there in a check. And so long, we don't want you as a customer. And they said other things like, we need to protect our workforce, as if I was sort of attacking somebody, Anyway, it's a very odd letter. And initially I thought, well, this is the way things are. But then I thought about it a bit more, and actually I prayed, and I felt the Lord saying, make a stand on this one. So I did. So I rang up some friends. I'm a member of a thing called the Free Speech Union, which you may have heard of.
Yep.
Who do an excellent job. And I rang up a chap there called Fraser, and he was very helpful. And I sent him a copy of the letter, of course, to say, what is this? And I managed to get hold of a copy of my original that I sent to them, the 2 paragraphs I sent to them. I sent that to them as well. And then I said, is this solid ground? Have I done anything wrong? Have I said anything wrong here? And they said, no, clean as a whistle. This is a very cut and dried case. It's just freedom of speech. You expressed your view after being asked for it. They don't like the view. They want to silence you. Cancel culture, And so off we went to the races, basically. He introduced me to the Times journalist, and on Friday afternoon, I talked to him, and he published it on Saturday. And then, the way the press work is, one writes something, and then all the others copy it. They don't go to the original source necessarily. They just copy each other. So then Mail Online took it up, and that circulated a lot more. And then you see the phone's been ringing off the hook since. Although I'm not on a campaign here. Yeah, I'm just telling my story. So I've only actually done 3 bits of media, which was the Sunday Telegraph, the Times, and I went on. A friend of mine runs a show on GB News, a chap called Calvin Robinson, who you may have heard of. He's also
yes.
Oh, you know him? Okay, yeah.
I know him well.
Okay. Well, he's ordained, and I've known him from last year, so only a while ago, and he rang me up and said, "Hey, look, we've got a show on Saturday night. Do you want to come on it for 10 minutes?" Yeah. So I did, and that was the only bit of filming I've done on this, really, and that seemed to get another lot of circulation going. Apparently, it made Mumsnet, which I didn't know.
Well, I mean, because Mumsnet will agree with a lot of those things you've said. You see, and it's interesting because it's a lot of other things have happened in very similar circumstances with a lot of other people in the last. So the timing is quite remarkable, really.
Well, it is, and that's what Calvin was highlighting in his show that night on Saturday. He did his little monologue at the beginning, and he went through all the banks that have done something similar. And I hadn't realised how much of a problem this is. And again, a lot of them have been got at by Stonewall, because Stonewall invented this thing I think called diversity champions, which essentially means we're going to kowtow to our ethic and agree. And if you don't do that, we're going to shame you, and we're going to say, "Ooh, that company, they're not good with LGBT, and they're not helping." This sort of stuff. I think that's just intimidation, isn't it? I mean,
it's intimidation, it's bullying, and it's fear mongering as well. And the idea is that, because you mentioned, well, if I write and maybe 100 other people write, maybe 100 other did, and maybe they've got their accounts closed too, but they weren't brave enough to say or do anything. And in fact, they're just suffering and languishing in silence now because they feel that they've done or said something wrong, which is merely expressing their views about what is a very damaging ideology for children.
I agree. That was one of as a pastor, you'll understand this. That was actually my heart concern. Yeah. Was the next guy in line or next woman in line is going to be browbeaten and bullied by them.
That's it.
I may be in a position just because of where I am and what I'm doing to speak up and protect them, because this is, as again the Free Speech Union reminded me, this is YBS actually being prejudicial. They're basically saying, we don't want to do banking with people who don't agree with us on this particular ethic.
That's right.
That's divisive.
Right. And they're also discriminating against you based on what you could say, these are firmly held religious beliefs.
Yeah, that's why I sign my name Rev Richard at the bottom.
Yeah. It's a hint, isn't it? Although these days it might not be. But no, you're absolutely right, and that's a key point as well. That they're prioritising certain people's desire not to feel offended by your word over your right to be delivered objective financial services. And the problem there is, if you apply for another bank account, what other banks will often ask is, have you been rejected ever by a bank? And you've now got to say yes, and they will by default say, well, in that case, we can't give, without reason, the fact that you've been rejected by somebody else means you can't have a bank account, which puts you in a very, very precarious position.
Well, indeed, we'd have been really stuck. If this had been a current account, or if I had a mortgage with them or something, then we'd be in real trouble. I mean, as it is, it's just a savings account, and as I said, there's not much money in it, sadly. But they really do need to behave better, and this is really good. I'm really pleased the amount of press spotlight stirring up has happened as a result of this, and they've been under the spotlight, and they've got to change their behaviour. They really have.
And I think you will do well because you've got an almost immediate precedent from a time perspective. Another Christian organisation who again involved in LGBT, ex-LGBT people who recently won £20,000 from Barclays, who closed their account. So the law is pretty clear about these things. To have beliefs in marriage between a man and a woman, or to voice your objections around different gender-based ideologies, it's protected by law. You're allowed to do that. If you do it in a hateful or threatening way, well, that's something else entirely. But
I know, and that's the pushback. The pushback that they have, and you may have seen in the press, was we don't do this lightly. We only do it in cases of rudeness, abuse, violence, or discrimination. Now, not being sort of promoting myself, but none of that was in those messages. I've been polite throughout. I'm not being violent to anybody, not being abusive. I wasn't prejudicial. I was stating the orthodox Christian approach to one particular sexual ethic.
Yeah, and the idea that they're promoting diversity couldn't be more false, because it's not diversity. It's compliance with a certain narrow opinion, and if you don't, you get punished punitively. That's not diversity.
Not on.
Not on. Absolutely right.
Well, I was going to say I've had so much feedback. I've literally hundreds of messages, letters, texts, and all sorts of stuff through the filling station ministry, which is the ministry involved with. And I've had quite a few from Muslim friends who are saying, totally with you, we agree, And so it's not just the Christian church community, it's other religious groupings who are also pretty disgusted by, particularly it's the transsexual things, the transsexual element that people live by.
I mean, this is the irony is that the Equality Act protects certain groups, but not if you've got a particular political opinion, for example. We had the case of Mayor Forstater, which is quite interesting.
Yes, I saw that one, yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite relevant too. But we almost feel we need to add everyone else into the Equality Act too, because people shouldn't be told they can't have a bank account just because they think about something differently to the people or some members of staff in the bank. Absolutely absurd. No one's asking the bank or to produce a certain message that they disagree with, but to give you objective banking facilities and services, irrespective of what you might think in the privacy of your own mind, is quite ridiculous. But there we are. Richard, I'm sure this is going to go on for a little while and then you're going to come out of this victorious. But can I thank you on behalf of so many people who are just trapped by the fear culture these days. Thank you for standing up. It makes all the difference. It really, really does. A few brave people. I would say, I don't want to interrupt you, Tony, but I would say people viewing this, stand up, guys. There's far more of us than there are of them on this minority fringe of extremism. And they behave badly. I think one thing that's happening is that the veil is being removed. We're actually seeing what they're like in here, in their viciousness and unattractive approach to things. And intolerance, as you mentioned earlier, intolerance. They're making judgments about all the rest of us. But, stand up, be confident. The truth is the truth. Normal life is good, And that's the thing. We could go on this for ages, but at the end of the day, it's a free country. You're allowed to say politely whatever you think you want to say freely. And we need to maintain that for everyone's benefit, for those on the other side who believe different things too, because that pendulum can easily swing.
I agree entirely.
Yeah. Richard, all the very best to you. Thank you very much for standing, and thank you very much for your time this morning, Rev Richard Fothergill.
Pleasure. Very nice to chat.